सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The oldest cliche in the book goes, it's all over bar the shouting. However, as the debate on the no confidence motion ended in Parliament today, it was all over. There wasn't even the shouting. That's because the opposition had walked out midway through the Prime Minister's address. So he finished it to cheers and to applause from his own side, from Treasury benches. There were no shouting, screaming, protests. And then the speaker called for a vote. That said, we pick up some highlights for you, some takeaways for you from what the Prime Minister said. It was almost a 2-hour long speech, right? Give or take a few minutes, almost a 2-hour long speech. And he touched upon many things and he elaborated on many things. But just as yesterday, we had looked at stuff that Congress and other opposition party leaders had said against the government, particularly Rahul Gandhi, taking the cue from Rahul Gandhi, and then also major speakers from other parties, constituents of the India INDIA alliance had said. Based on that, we had drawn for you a bunch of takeaways that give us an idea of how the opposition is going to plan its campaign for 2024. That I will again share a link with you. You can check on that. I'm not doing any recap on that. From today's speech by the Prime Minister, I'm picking up some takeaways also on how he's going to structure his own campaign for 2024. What's going to be his target? What's going to be his message? What's going to be his message on the negative side? That is attack on his challengers. What's going to be his message on the positive side? That's for himself. So I pick up a bunch of points to begin with. Six by way of what he'll be attacking and 6 by way of what he'll be projecting about himself. So what he'll be attacking, number one, the first point is it's very clear that his attack today was almost entirely, in fact, I would say entirely on the Congress party. He attacked only the Congress party. Occasionally, he took a sideways swipe at some partner in the India alliance, but basically to say, just be careful who you are partnering with, or just be careful whose leadership you are accepting in this alliance. That's all, not otherwise. So his focus was purely the Congress party, and you can see that he finds just as the opposition decided this time that the way to attack the NDA or the BJP is to attack what is the strongest element there. That is the core of the BJP and NDA right now is Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his personality. So they decided to attack him and then try and dismantle his supposedly strongest attributes. Similarly, exactly like a mirror image now of the strategy, Narendra Modi is now choosing the Congress party as his target, because that is the core of the new opposition challenge. And he thinks that if he can attack that and dismantle that, then a lot of his work is done. So, number one, attack is all on the Congress party. Number two, within that attack on the Congress party, the attack is specifically focused on the Gandhi family. You see, for example, all the critical references he made to all the actions, all this sense of omission and commission, including the emergency, everything that he mentioned, that pertained to members of the Gandhi family. So there was about Jawaharlal Nehru, 1962, Assam, etc. The war with China. There was Indira Gandhi, many references, and I will come to that. And there was nothing on other prime ministers from the Congress party. Nothing on Lal Bahadur Shastri, nothing on Narasimha Rao, nothing even on Manmohan Singh. So within the attack on the Congress party, the target was on the Gandhi family and Gandhi dynasty. That was very, very, very specific. I'll talk about it in some detail as we go along. Number three, within this attack, what was his barbs? His barbs were basically on the Congress party's hunger for power. And he said, first of all, he said, the biggest criticism of the Gandhi dynasty, he said, or the Congress party and the Gandhi dynasty, Nehru-Gandhi dynasty, let me specify, was that it's been power hungry. He also said it's been founded by a Britisher, A.O. Hume. Indian freedom movement really acquired a new energy, and that's when it acquired a new flag, and the Congress party was quick to grab that flag, the tricolor, so that its own party flag will also be seen as the national flag and vice versa. That's part of the Congress party's quote-unquote power hunger. And not just that, just as the Congress party, he says, usurped the flag of the freedom movement, it also usurped the name Gandhi, because it knew that Gandhi is a very popular name. Now that's the whole story that goes around, that Feroz Gandhi's name was spelt differently. It was spelt as Ghandy, and Jawaharlal Nehru's daughter and then grandchildren, etc., quote unquote, again stole that name. Then number four, he says Congress party now is a product that's over, it's outdated, it's stale, it's now self-destructed. And then he lists a bunch of states where Congress party lost power many decades ago. In fact, he begins with Tamil Nadu, where Congress party last won an election in 1962, and he says since then they haven't won an election there. And never mind the fact that, and I'm adding this, he didn't say it, I'm adding this, that never mind the fact that today Congress party has an ally ruling that state. But his point is correct, that since 1962, Congress party has not won an election in Tamil Nadu, and similarly, he lists many other states. So he says once the Congress goes out of a state, it doesn't come back. People have been rejected it in state after state after state after state. So once again, attack all on Congress. Number five, he questions Congress party's nationalism, its national commitment. So he talks about the war against China, where Nehru is seen as weak, not really up to the challenge against China. Then he talks about, and these are things that surprised me, he talks about Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, having given away the tiny island of Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka. I will talk about that in just a little bit. Tiny island of Katchatheevu, uninhabited island of about 200 acres to Sri Lanka. Then he talks about the Congress party's actions in Mizoram, where air power was used by Mrs. Gandhi on 5th of March 1966. Just for clarity, I want to mention to you that was the day that Lal Denga started his insurgency and declared some kind of sovereignty, and it looked like his people, his guerrillas, were about to storm the treasury, the deputy commissioner's house and office, and also the Assam Rifles headquarters, the Assam Rifles battalion headquarters. And Mrs. Gandhi used air power. That's a fact of history, fully established. She used air power. She carried out bombing and strafing missions there to buy time until the army columns could get there. So he mentions that as an example of Congress party or Nehru-Gandhi family's insensitivity to the Northeast. He also mentions that Jawaharlal Nehru made that famous radio address, or infamous, sorry, I shouldn't have said famous, infamous radio address, where he said, my heart goes out to the people of Assam. That's when the big hasty and panicky retreat was on as the Chinese were advancing in what was called as Nefa then, Arunachal now. And then again, a surprise, he talks about Mrs. Gandhi having used the army in Operation Blue Star and also using the army at Akal Takht. Akal Takht, as we know, was destroyed in Operation Blue Star. And then on Kashmir, he says the same Congress party had not been trusting the people of Kashmir, the nationalists of Kashmir. It had been actually putting its faith in Hurriyat, which wasn't even willing to carry the flag of India. So that is the attack on the Congress over the issue of nationalism and the Congress party's cynicism towards the Northeast. In fact, he goes on to say that Congress party was really not interested in the Northeast because the Northeast, most states have sent 1 or 2 MPs to Parliament, so Congress party didn't see any particular stake there. There's a couple of more things in detail on the Northeast in the Congress party, to which I will come in a minute. And sixth point, he attacked, first point, he attacked the Congress party, then within the Congress party, Gandhi family, and then so on and so forth. And finally, within all that, he attacked Rahul Gandhi personally because he now sees Rahul Gandhi as the preeminent leader of the India alliance. And he says that's a failed project. It continues to be relaunched all the time. And there was a lot of barbs and sarcasm about him, including the fact that people, he said, who have never raised one radish muli, one radish in a pot, right? Gamla, one radish in a pot. In fact, most of us would know that if you just put a seed, just take a seed in a pot, in the course of time, it will yield a nice white radish with nice green leaves. So he says those who haven't even raised a muli, a radish in a pot, if they go to a lush field, a lush farmer's lush field, they will be impressed by this. So basically, he's saying that Rahul Gandhi really has no idea of India. So these are the 6 points that he has now finessed, and you will see this play out in the 2024 election campaign until the campaign is done. That's one. Then the things that he's saying, the positive things that he's saying about himself and his party. Number one, he says the opposition is no match. The opposition is no match. They are divided. And he said the same hands that you see clasped together, they've come together. The same hands will tomorrow be carrying daggers, quite keen to bury those daggers in each other's backs. So that's why the opposition is no match to the cohesion that he and his party brings to the table. Number two, and that's very important, and we've seen some opinion polls already, several opinion polls that say that while people might be hurting economically by way of not having enough jobs, etc., people may be pained by this or that, but one thing on which there is a wide acceptance across India is the claim that India's global stature or respect has gone up under Narendra Modi. So that's his second big point. He builds on that. He also quotes the endorsements that India has got for its drinking water program, say from WHO and Swachh Bharat program, and also from the IMF on poverty eradication. So he quotes WHO, IMF, and talks about India's global stature having gone up, and of course adds in the promise that by 2028, he says when you bring in the next vote of no confidence, India would have become the number 3 economy in the world. The fact, however, is, I'm adding this, the fact, however, is that given the scale that India has reached already, the power of compounding, and given that the base is now risen, even if India grew at what used to be called, unfortunately, the Hindu rate of growth, even if India grows at that growth rate, that is 3.5% to 4%, even then India will become the third largest economy. So this is a little opinion from me that to set the target of being the third largest economy by 2028 is actually a very modest and conservative target. India should do better than that. I'm not saying it should become the second largest, but I think the new targets have to be set in terms of per capita incomes. That aside, that was a little comment. That aside, number three, he says that my government is known for economic discipline. That I will not do what the Congress party would have done, what the left populism would have done. And he says that's what the Congress party governments and opposition governments are doing in every state. They are just taking taxpayers' money and distributing that money, throwing that money around to get votes. And everybody is going bankrupt. The states are going bankrupt, and they are officially suspending their development programs. That is not going to happen, and that is not the right thing for India. Then he says national security. Nobody has shown the strength that I have shown, and nobody can show the strength that I have demonstrated, and I can show again. And he goes back to Balakot, Pulwama, surgical strike, etc., etc. There's no mention of China. Number five, he says, he personalizes it. He says, look at all the attack that's coming on my government. It's not an attack on my government, it's an attack on me. Because these are people from the elites. These are people from the elites whose clothes used to go overseas to be dry cleaned by plane, on whose birthdays cakes were cut on board aircraft, for whose vacations the fleet of Indian Navy would be in attendance. So these are These are the old elites of India, and they cannot tolerate one garib ka beta, somebody who's coming from a very poor family, to be sitting on this chair, to be sitting on this chair of the Prime Minister. They, in fact, he says, hate me so much that their slogan about me is Modi teri kabar khodegi, right? That Modi, you shall be buried alive, or something like that. It's not a very apt translation, but Modi teri kabar khodegi, Modi, your grave will be dug. And finally he says that since Northeast is the question now, and this motion has come in the context of the Northeast, look at my government's commitment to the Northeast. I have done more for the Northeast than any government in the past. And then he lists many things that he's done in the Northeast. Now I will very briefly elaborate some of these points. He said, for example, many of the states where since the Congress lost power, since the Congress got rejected, it has never made a recovery. Tamil Nadu was one, I mentioned it earlier, 1962. Then there is Odisha, where the Congress has been out of power for more than 2 decades. West Bengal, the last time the Congress party won elections there was 1972. The party that defeated the Congress then, the Left Front, and the party that continues to be in power now and that defeated the Left Front and the Congress in turn, they are both members of India Now, INDA Alliance. I'm adding that, he didn't say it, I'm adding that for context. But he said states in which the Congress lost power and has not recovered forever. That is Tamil Nadu, Odisha, West Bengal, Tripura, Nagaland. In fact, it then goes on to say that in Delhi, Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal, by the way, 3 states that Congress has ruled in the past, Congress today does not have even one MLA. So once again, the attack is on the Congress party, and he's projecting the idea, he's selling the idea that Congress party is completely a spent force. It is not a party or a force ideologically or politically or electorally that even its allies in the new India Alliance can count on. Then he mocks the India Alliance a little bit. He says it's a 26 parties have got together, and he says it's a barat, it's a wedding party where everybody thinks he's going to be the groom. It's a barat with many doulas, he says. That's because everybody thinks I can become Prime Minister. And then he points to many contradictions among these parties, or how they've fought in the past, how they have worked against each other, how they've had many complaints in the past, how they've suffered, some of them have suffered violence at the hand, even violence at the hands of some others who are now together in this alliance. And he says, look, all of you guys who are joining this alliance, you are going towards Parivarvad and Darbarvad. That is to an environment which is dynastic and which is feudal. And then he says this Congress party actually undermined and tried to destroy everybody who was not from the Gandhi family. So he lists Ambedkar, Jagjeevan Ram, Morarji Desai, Chandrasekhar, Ram Manohar Lohia, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Lal Bahadur Shastri, Charan Singh, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and he lists many of these leaders whose portraits, he said, were only put up in the Central Hall of Parliament when non-Congress governments were in power, because the Congress was not willing to preserve their legacies. Forget building on them, because Congress party was all about the Gandhi family. Then he takes on Rahul Gandhi's references to Ravan and why Lanka was burned. And he said, all right, Rahul, somebody said that Lanka was burnt not by Hanuman, but Ravan's ahankar. Ahankar is arrogance. So he said, just as Ravan's arrogance burnt Lanka, whose arrogance burnt the Congress party? It is the arrogance of the Gandhi family that has reduced the Congress party from 400 seats to 40 seats. That's a reference to Rajiv Gandhi getting 415 in the election of 1984 and the Congress party getting 44 seats in 2014. So he says in a democracy, Janta is also a Swarup. Janta also represents in a way Lord Ram. So just as Lord Ram did justice to Lanka because of Ravan's arrogance, the Janata, the people of India, have also done justice, as he sees it, to the Congress party because of the Gandhi family's arrogance. And then he uses strong language. He says Congress parties or Gandhi families is jhoot ki dukaan, jhoot ka bazaar, nafrat ki dukaan. And they are the ones who don't even accept, who actually hurt Sena ka Swabhiman, which means they hurt the self-respect of the armed forces. Now, you might be wondering what's he talking about, particularly the younger ones amongst all of us. And I know we have a lot of young readership and viewership. You might be wondering what's he talking about when he says, when these guys, Gandhi family, went on vacations, Indian Navy was in attendance, and now the same Navy ships are used to bring in Indians stranded overseas when other countries overseas have crisis. So he's referring to a holiday, famous, later infamous, but controversial holiday, on which Rajiv Gandhi went with his family and friends to Lakshadweep. And when he went on that holiday, the flagship of the Navy at that point and a bunch of other ships. So the one fleet of the Navy was in attendance. They were hanging around the islands while he vacationed there. So that is the reference that he is making. Again, Katchatheevu, what's the issue? So Katchatheevu is an island. It's an island. Today, if you look at the maritime boundary, it's on Sri Lanka's side. Now, through history, India or Sri Lanka, British India or Sri Lanka, they had a kind of divided control or sovereignty over the island, which is completely uninhabited. In 1974, India and Sri Lanka finalized their maritime boundaries, and that is when the Katchatheevu island was given to Sri Lanka. Given means Sri Lanka's claims on the island were accepted. Mrs. Gandhi was in power at that time. Now that is something that the Tamil Nadu government, the Tamil Nadu politicians, the Dravid parties keep on talking about, because they want the island back, because every island then means exclusive fishing areas, etc. And fishermen have problems in those areas, as we know. Those are running controversies. So he is blaming Mrs. Gandhi of having made that concession to the Sri Lankan government in 1974, and he says that people who raised the Katchatheevu question, Stalin has written a letter to me, Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu has written a letter to me. So people today, today's leaders, and I think that hint is on Rahul Gandhi, people today do they even know what Katchatheevu is? And then he specifically attacks Rahul Gandhi on his saying that Modi government has murdered Bharat Mata in Manipur. So he says, first of all, it's an insult to Mother India. But then he says, how can this be said about those who've actually divided, who've actually dismembered Vande Mataram? Now, Vande Mataram, as we know, his reference is to the fact that Vande Mataram, in the Congress party's version, a couple of stanzas are used for Vande Mataram, but following stanzas, which in a way are descriptions of the goddess, those stanzas are dropped because those are seen as too religious. So he says, you people have even dismembered the great national song in praise of Mother India, and you are now accusing us of having murdered Mother India in the Northeast. And then of course he refers to Ram Manohar Lohia having accused, and that's correct, that's accurate. Ram Manohar Lohia did accuse Nehru of deliberately not developing the Northeast. The fact that Nehru deliberately did not develop at least what became Arunachal Pradesh later was NEFA in his time, Northeastern Frontier Agency. That was a policy that was confected between Nehru and his advisor, his amateur anthropologist advisor, Warrior Elwin. And that was a policy that Nari Rustamji, the former veteran of the Indian Frontier Administrative Service, who's written a bunch of really brilliant books on the Northeast, his experiences serving in the border areas, he describes that policy as hastening slowly, that don't let Arunachal develop too fast. Arunachal in particular, but other states were also kept sort of protected from outside influences. But government there in India was smarting under the Naga insurgency, and there was a belief then, Nehru's time, there was a belief then that the missionaries, particularly foreign Christian missionaries, had played a critical role in building and supporting the insurgency in Nagaland. So there was also concern and fear, and there was also a belief that if the Chinese came in again. India was still not ready to defend the region. So maybe it was better not to build roads in Arunachal Pradesh or not to develop infrastructure in Arunachal Pradesh. That was a defensive policy. Today it looks cowardly, but that was a policy. And I would recommend to you to read some books. For example, if you read Warrior Elvin's book, Philosophy for Nefa, or if you read Nari Rustamji's Himalayan Borderlands, you will get some more insights on this.